Hey, everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Reverend Matt, and I'm the Connectionalist. Today, we need to talk. We need to have a conversation about the state of apologetics, Christian discussion online, the places it's going. And I want to react specifically to a video by the Council of Trent by Trent Horn about some of the things people have said to him. He's a Catholic apologist, if you don't know. And I don't think that his specific situation is unique to him. I think that there is a great deal of degradation in the state of online discourse, and it's been going on for many years across many industries and fields. But in theology, it's been getting frankly disgusting. Um, Many folks who are on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, frankly, should be ashamed of themselves. Should be ashamed of themselves, and they're sinning. And Trent goes as far from his Catholic perspective to say some of these people have lost their salvation, and I think that's a legitimate thing to have a discussion about. And I really just want to have a conversation about that today because there's this burgeoning kind of movement that says third wayism is dead, and third wayism is like this thing that extremists came up with to describe people who act like Christians and they're uncomfortable with acting like Christians. And so they call it third wayism, as if like being nice and kind about your beliefs and as a Christian is somehow a bad thing, when in reality, they just want to have an excuse for their bad behavior. That's all this really is, friends. When you see people taking down third wayism or whatever, they just want an excuse to be a jerk. They want an excuse to be sinful. They want an excuse to act completely ridiculous on the internet. And so a lot of these folks do this anonymously, which, by the way, if you are a person who posts anonymously, trolling, doing that stuff, you're a coward. It's a deep sin. It's cowardice. You're a coward if you're doing that. You should stop doing that immediately. Either make yourself publicly known as an actual person, or don't do it at all, because to hide behind anonymous speech and say vile things on the internet is a deep sin. And I know there's a lot of folks that engage in this, and so I just need to be clear about where I'm at on this. So we're going to react to Trent's video about his specific situation, but I'm going to be talking about the larger issues that are going on. I want to let you know some of the language in this video is going to be not kid appropriate. So if you have a kiddo around, you may watch this video later or use discretion as a parent on that if you've got a kiddo around, because I think the bad language is bleeped out in Trent's video, but there's, even things that are being bleeped out, a lot of kids can put it together, right? So I just wanted to give that as a fair warning, but I think it's important that we actually look at what's happening because it's pretty disgusting and it needs to be condemned for what it is. And I really want to speak out on this because I've been seeing it on Twitter, just gotcha theology, gotcha debates, degradation to the point where you get dragged into it as an influencer because you think, oh, I got to be in on this controversy. I got to, the more bombastic my claim, the more clicks it gets. Friends, that's just the truth. The more controversy videos I've done, they get more views. And that is a demonic temptation to give into that in order to gain popularity or gain subscribers. And I'm never going to do that on this channel because, I just don't want to engage in that. And I don't need this as my source of income or my ministry, right? This is an aspect of what I do, but I don't believe in stirring the pot just to make money. In fact, my channel was monetized, but I didn't turn in my YouTube PIN number or something. So it's actually been demonetized. So most of the views on this video won't even go towards money until they got to send me a piece of mail and I got to enter a PIN number. So I want you to know that I'm coming at this from a perspective of I'm not here to make a buck. I'm here to, because I got a lot of people in my comments who care what I have to say on this issue. And I feel like I have somewhat of a responsibility online to try and take the temperature down. And sometimes to take the temperature down, I have to call out what is clearly evil and to warn you, the viewer, of the traps and the folly of falling into this kind of evil. And so that's what I'm here to do. So let's go ahead and dive right on into Trent's video.
Last month, I replied to Andrew Wilson's criticisms of me that he made on the Patrick Bet-David show. And the responses from him and some of the other people I criticized in that episode ranged from the unusual to the unhinged.
I think By the way, Trent is like really good at handling this stuff without getting upset, which I commend him for. He's just got a much more even killed personality than I do. I would be much more like um probably I don't really know, passionate in the way I would be addressing this, because I think Trent doesn't have to prove. He has to convince the people who like people like Andrew Wilson. He doesn't have to convince, people who already like debate that isn't targeted and mean and all that stuff. And so sometimes you have to push hard to get your point across. And I understand sometimes you feel like you have to use tough words. And that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to use tough words, but it's going to be the very best I can in the spirit of love. And I feel like Trent does that as well by taking on these folks. And it's got to happen.
So in today's episode, I'm going to go through those responses and restate why I consider this issue so important and not just something we can agree to disagree
Super
about.
important.
All right, so to give you a little context, Andrew Wilson said I and Lila Rose belong to a group he calls sewing circle Christians, who care more about appeasing liberal.
By the way, Andrew Wilson is like bottom of the barrel, worst offenders, absolutely out of control person who needs a spiritual director, and a pastor needs to leave the internet immediately. Absolute. Basically, everything that comes out of his mouth in Christian argument is sin. So that's my warning to you about false teachers that are among us. Many people think I'm a false teacher because I'm like center left on like a couple of theology issues, and you're more than free to think that. But from my perspective, I have to call out what I think is false teaching, and Andrew Wilson is in that about 90% of the time.
By criticizing Christians who swear, for example, instead of uniting with those Christians to combat degenerates.
But I never see him surrounded with a panel of like the worst degenerates on earth debating all of their worldviews simultaneously. But they have tons of criticisms for people who do.
But that's not my position. As I made clear in my response to Andrew, I'm all in favor of doing whatever it takes to combat error and evil, except for using sinful methods like verbally abusing people.
And Trent's going to make a case here that like you basically have to ignore the teachings of Christ and the teachings of Scripture to conduct yourself in the way that Andrew Wilson and others conduct. You basically literally just have to ignore the Scriptures, which is what they do.
And to make sure I didn't misunderstand Andrew, I sent him the script for my episode ahead of time, and I incorporated almost all his replies into the final.
That's very nice. I don't know if I could do that. That's very nice and charitable, but he certainly doesn't deserve that
episode. So I was baffled when I saw him post on X afterwards that he considered my response fundamentally dishonest. For Andrew's response paled in comparison to others, especially Jay Dyer. In one part of my episode, I criticized Dyer for calling Talbert Swan tilde Swin.
And I have, by the way, let me back up. I have no problem calling folks what it is, right? That's not, me cursing at them, insulting their mother, insulting their wife, and taking on the character of the person and saying there's a habit of lying and there's a habit of grifting. And that has to be called out. And that's what I'm doing, because I'm just tired of seeing it and saying nothing about it. I'm tired of seeing it. I'm also tired of seeing young men fall prey to this kind of thinking and talking. It's not Christian to be mean. It's Christian to hold people accountable, but it's not Christian to be a jerk.
In one part of my episode, I criticized Dyer for calling Talbert Swan tilde Swinton. He wasn't being abusive, but it is annoying and silly for someone who wants to publicly defend the Christian faith on a large platform. But then Dyer said on X, Trent Horn virtue signals over me calling a fake black activist bishop a fake bishop. But I didn't say that. This is either a lie or an ignorant falsehood. So I told Jay, I accurately pointed out your embarrassing behavior, which in this case was calling Talbert Swan tilde Swinton. I said nothing about the title of bishop. This is yet another example of you behaving like an overgrown 12-year-old instead of a mature man of God. Grow up.
This is a great response, right? Like with folks like this, you can't be like, hey, I'm really concerned about your behavior. You have to be like, you're acting like a 12-year-old and it's time to grow up. It's my job as an elder, a presbyter, to shepherd the people of God and to say, that's wrong. You need to be held accountable for that. And it's absolutely ridiculous what is happening, and young men and women need people like Trent and Gavin Ortland and others who set a good example for this to continue to setting a good example for calling out this poor behavior.
Notice my reply is not verbal abuse. It's a fraternal correction rooted in objective facts about how Dyer was conducting himself. It's the same correction I gave Nick Fuentes regarding his abusive behavior towards my family.
Oh, my family. You attacked my family. You called my wife a bitch. Well, okay, you're a bitch. She's a bitch. You're a couple of bitch. You and your wife and your whole family are you got a whole family of whiny, lying. Is that better?
Well, what would be better is if you submitted yourself to a spiritual director.
Yeah.
Maybe someone like Father Ripperger, so you can learn to behave in an actually Christ-like way and not like an overgrown 12-year-old screaming into his Xbox Live headset.
Yeah. That, friends, that's what evil looks like. It's a pattern of unchecked and unrepented sin that spirals to such a place where you can't even recognize the sin in your own life anymore, and it's just evil. That's what evil is, right? That's the difference between sin and evil.
Once again, fraternal correction is not the same as abusive insults, and any mature person can see the difference. But after giving this kind of correction to Jay Dyer, he completely lost it. He immediately blocked me and went on a tirade of posts, including one where he simply says, "Hey, Trent, F word you."
Yeah. And these are Christian apologists. It's crazy. It's messed up.
And this kind of language isn't unusual for Jay, though I would ask him if the Orthodox monks on Mount Athos talk like he does.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I'm going to be blunt. If a person consistently has this kind of anger in his heart, he will not go to heaven. What concerns me is that Dyer, Wilson, and other commenters like them cultivate this sinful attitude among their audiences.
Right. So then from a Wesleyan perspective, let's talk about Trent's comment about salvation. From a Wesleyan perspective, if your life looks nothing like Christ, then you don't have faith. You don't actually believe in him, because if you actually believed in him, if you actually had faith, it would show in an outpouring of your works. It would show in an outpouring of your character. Now, people say, well, what's the line, right? How can you tell if you have enough good works that your faith is actually an actual real faith? That's not an easy question to answer, but it's kind of one of those things where you know it when you see it, right? Like Jay Dyer, Andrew Wilson, like all these folks, their life has so much anger and vitriol and hatred towards others that I don't want to say they're for sure lost their salvation, but it's like I would not assume that they have salvation, because it's an absolute pattern of evil and disgusting behavior.
And that can lead to damnation for many of their followers if they fall down the rabbit hole of hatred and malice. What amazes me about everyone who says I'm tone policing is that
we are tone policing. That's what the Christian church does. It's part of your character. Your tone and how you present yourself is a part of your character.
When I watch their response videos, they just stare at their screen as I read off Bible verse after Bible verse that says Christians should not act like the way they act.
Right.
And they have no response. Or they use the craziest exegetical gymnastics to get around the text.
Yeah.
Here's part of Jay's reaction. Dropping an F-bomb to insult somebody, like Andrew does in this clip.
I will never be able to convince you of my worldview. Charlie, I just think, honestly, you're too stupid to understand them.
St. Paul.
Can you imagine looking at a woman across the table like Andrew Wilson is in that clip? And this is a person who's not a believer, who has a completely different worldview. A lot of times on that podcast that he was on, it's a lot of like women who are doing prostitution, that kind of thing. And you look at them and you say, I think you're too stupid to understand. That is patronizing. It's bad character. It's really important that you appeal to people on the basis of love. That's what St. Paul does in the book of Philemon when he's trying to reconcile two parties. He appeals to them on the basis of love. Now, what you have to notice is Paul used harsh words often, but this is a very important piece. Paul never punches down. Paul always punches up. And what I mean by that is his harsh words were for the religious authorities. It was for people leading churches, right? It was for Christians who are already in the family. That's who he had more harsh words for. He was much gentler with people who were non-believers because there was no expectation. He's like, well, that they're not that they're not going to see the world the way I see it because they're a non-believer. I have to convince them of this, and I'm going to do that by saying you're too stupid to understand me. Like, that's not going to be effective. That's not gentle. And so when I'm going after Andrew Wilson and these others who claim to be believers, it's a punching up action, right? I'm going to talk to Andrew Wilson and Nick Fuentes, who's probably, king of the evil trifecta here, and Jay Dyer and all these other folks. I'm going to go after them with much more blunt words, because they're part of they're part of Christendom, right? So there's an expectation that you act better, right? But when I'm across the table from somebody who's like an agnostic or an atheist, and they say something absolutely ridiculous, they're not beholden to Christian value sets. They haven't agreed to be a part of that yet. I may disagree with them, but you see what I'm saying about punching up versus punching down? That's very important to understand.
Paul repeatedly says that overseers in the church must be gentle and not quarrelsome or violent, and that all Christians must put away anger, wrath, malice, slander, and foul talk from their mouth. Jesus said in Matthew 5:22, whoever insults his brother shall be liable to the council, and whoever says, you fool, shall be liable to the hell of fire. And 2 Timothy chapter 2 said,
the text is not making a joke or making fun of people. The text accuses his brother and thus liable to the council. So that's some Roman Catholic translation.
Notice that Jay has to sit in silence at the verses which describe how Christians should act, because he consistently does not act like that.
Right.
Second, Matthew 5:22 doesn't have the Greek word kategoreo, which means accuse, though that word does appear in Matthew 12:10 and Matthew 27:12. An accuser is mentioned in Matthew 5:25 in a different context. In a different,
yes.
But the Greek of Matthew 5:22, the verse I referenced, just records Jesus saying anyone who becomes angry or enraged with his brother, or gizomenos, is liable to judgment. And anyone who says or calls, not accuse, but merely says his brother is a raka or fool, will be liable to the Sanhedrin and hell of fire.
Okay, so why this is really important is, like, even while I'm making this video, right, I feel that anger, right? And anger can be used righteously, right? But, like, what this verse is trying to portray is, like, when you become angry at a brother, you become a lot more liable to judgment, because you're more likely to do something stupid, say something stupid, or cross the line. And that's why it's really important in these conversations to just point out, hey, this is bad behavior. We're not going to stand for it. But I'm not going to be like, hey, Andrew Wilson, you're an idiot. Your family's an idiot. Like, I'm not going to do that, right? Because that is poor character. Right? That is poor character. What I will say is, hey, you are in a pattern of sin. That is evil. That's the accountability piece, right? Recognizing at the same time, hey, I'm a sinner too. I get angry. So I have to check it in my own heart, even while we're sitting here, you and me talking in this video, viewer, even while I'm sitting here, I have to keep that in check in my own heart and address the spiritual issues at hand without crossing the line myself. Very, very important.
And this isn't some Catholic translation, because the same translation can be found in the Orthodox Study Bible. Another point my profane critics made was that I was inconsistent, because I thought Stephen Colbert's joke with Philip Zimbardo, where he said, I teach Sunday school, mother effer, was okay.
Right.
But most people recognize that Colbert was speaking
That's a little different.
Comedically and over the top way. He wasn't angrily calling Zimbardo an MFer, like how Dyer said F you to me.
It's not great, but it's definitely said with a not anger in his heart. It's a laugh line. Colbert was trying to get a laugh out of that line.
With anger. Or other
different.
apologists online who I've seen.
Still not great to use that language, obviously, which, that just needs to be noted. It's not great to use that language when you're debating with somebody, or and best to limit it the best you can in your life. But yeah.
Use language like F you, you effing F slur. At worst, all this critique proves is I was incorrect in where we should draw the line between colorful speech and sinful speech. Not that there is no line to be drawn, or that these profane critics don't gratuitously go over the line in their own abusive behavior. Another thing these critics do is ignore the Bible's commands to be gentle by saying they're allowed to imitate the prophets, apostles, and Christ himself, who they say allegedly mocked people. That's the claim Sam Shamoun made when...
Okay, here's the thing. That is ridiculous. And here's why. One, Jesus never mocked people. He did have harsh words, but it was always punching up. His harsh words were basically, I can't think of one instance in which Jesus's most harsh words were for the poor and the marginalized or the Gentiles that weren't believers, right? His harshest words were for who? The religious authorities, the scribes and the Pharisees who ought to know better, but don't. The hypocrisy is what drove Jesus mad the most.
He was on Bryce Crawford's podcast recently. But let me give you an analogy to show why this method doesn't work. Imagine I told my children, don't steal and destroy books from the library. Then one day they start stealing books because they saw me take a pornographic book and destroy it. I'd tell them, I appreciate you trying to be like me, but you aren't mature enough to know what should and shouldn't be taken. So please just follow my instruction and don't take any books from the library.
Yeah, so the good example of this is when I was a youth minister. When I was teaching teenagers, I basically said, don't hang out with people who drink, smoke, do drugs. And they were like, not Pastor Matt at the time, but they were like, Matt, but like, Jesus hung out with sinners. And I was like, yes, that is true. But Jesus is God. He's also more mature than you, right? Once you are mature enough as a Christian to handle it without falling into temptation or peer pressure, absolutely you're supposed to hang out with sinners. Teenagers are not ready for that. By and large, teenagers are completely unprepared for that environment. So it's best to just stay away. Listen to what I was trying to say was listen to my instruction, right? Just because I'm doing something doesn't mean it's appropriate for you to do it because I'm at a different level of life maturity and spiritual maturity, right? I hang out with, am friends with people who drink, smoke weed, right? All sorts of things like that. I'm friends with those people. I go play cards. I don't gamble, but I play like Magic the Gathering, right? I play card games, board games with people who do those things, and I get along with them fine. But I'm able to do that because I'm at a life maturity stage, in a spiritual maturity stage, where I'm not going to immediately fall into peer pressure when that's much more common for teenagers, right? So that's kind of the point he's trying to make is like, just because Jesus and the prophets were doing these things doesn't always make it acceptable for you to do them.
In the same way, these critics end up justifying all kinds of vile, abusive behavior that holy people in Scripture would never permit. Frankly, I don't know how Scripture could be clearer on how Christians are supposed to engage others. So I'm going to read the verses yet again.
Trent's like, let me read you the Bible again.
And I challenge any of these profane critics to take each one, go through each of them, and explain why they don't apply to their own abusive rhetoric. Here we go. Colossians 3:8, put them all away, anger, wrath, malice, slander, and foul talk from your mouth. Ephesians 4:20.
Tough teaching, but it's true.
29, let no evil talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for edifying, as fits the occasion, that it may impart grace to those who hear. 2 Timothy 2:24 through.
And like for me in my life, like I definitely am like I have been a talk before listening kind of person throughout my life. So this has been difficult for me throughout my life, like not saying, being passionate in the moment, wanting to say something, but learning to kind of reserve my comment. That's been a skill I've had to learn. But here's the difference. When I make a mistake or I say a foul word or I think something foul or those kinds of things, here's the difference. I don't think I'm in the right for doing that. I immediately know I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have thought that. That's the difference. Most Christians aren't perfect on this issue, right? But the difference is most Christians know they could be doing better. They recognize that that's a character flaw instead of being like, no, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You're just tone policing me, right? Like that's not correct.
25, the Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome, but kindly to everyone, an apt teacher, forbearing, correcting his opponents with gentleness. Luke 6:27 through 28. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you.
Yeah.
Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. Romans 12:14. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. 1 Peter 3:9. Do not return evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, bless, for to this you have been called, that you may obtain a blessing.
So yeah, you know what Jesus and the scriptures are trying to do? They're trying to tone police you. Yes. You don't want to know why? Because you need it and I need it. We need that as humans. We need to be tone policed because when we're not, we're vile because of original sin. Okay. There's nothing like weird, ooh, tone policing. It's like, yeah, that's like self control is a fruit of the spirit. Tone policing is a part of self control, policing your own tone, policing the way you say things to people, right? I've had to learn, one of the number one things I've had to learn in life is to soften the things I say. Friends, I talk about this all the time with the people I work with in ministry, is like how hard I work when I'm in a committee meeting in the church, not only in my local church, but in the denomination, to really, I actually sit and I'm like, Matt, before you say this thing, you're angry about how things are going in this committee room right now. It doesn't matter. You need to present yourself with gentleness, because if you don't, everybody's going to turn their ears off anyway. And it's sinful, probably. That doesn't mean I don't speak the truth. I still say the truth, which, by the way, offends people anyway a lot of times when I do it. I still say the truth that's in my heart, but I have to learn to be more gentle. Now, sometimes people, when you say a hard truth that they don't want to hear, it doesn't matter how gentle you are, they still will say you're mean and a jerk. But you have to know in your own heart, you're not a mean jerk. You presented it gently. It's just a hard truth they didn't want to hear.
And yet Christians like Sam Shamoon say that we should curse the people who revile us.
It's ridiculous.
Is there a time and place to then throw pearls onto swine?
No, you never have a time and place, though. What you do is what Paul did. When he saw Elymas wasn't interested, what did he do? He cursed them and ridiculed them. That's their treatment. You son of the devil, enemy of all that is righteousness. You will not stop perverting the ways of the Lord. He didn't even entertain him to talk. He cursed him. When I
It's bad biblical interpretation.
say curse, not like curse like F word. No, that's not what I'm talking about. He rebuked him and invoked God's judgment on him. That's what I mean by curse.
And yeah.
Not like, hey.
And Bryce Crawford, I'll be honest, you know what? I kind of like Bryce Crawford. I know he's controversial because he goes around just randomly praying for people on the street or whatever. But I find him kind of endearing, and I actually find him to be genuine. He may not be genuine, I don't know, but I find him to be genuine. I think he really cares about people, and I hate to see him being influenced by grifters. It's unfortunate.
Your mother, I'm not saying that. Okay.
Right.
So when you see
I don't want him to become one. That's what I'm afraid of.
those people,
Because he's young and impressionable.
you are to rebuke them, chasten them, block them, and remove them.
I agree that if someone won't listen to you, you should probably kick the dust from your feet and move on.
Yeah.
But the New Testament is clear that we should bless and not curse our
enemies.
enemies.
Very clear about it.
And I'm astounded by the lengths my profane critics go to in order to justify their immoral behavior. We've already seen Jay Dyer try to do that with the Sermon on the Mount. Watch how Sam Shamoon does that with 1 Peter 3:15.
I'm thinking of 1 Peter 3:15, right? It says,
and when he talks about Paul cursing people, let's talk about descriptive versus prescriptive text. Just because Paul curses somebody in the story doesn't mean that's the right thing to do. Paul was a man. He was a sinner. Okay? He made mistakes. Just because that pops up in the story doesn't mean literally everything Paul did was exactly the right way to handle it. It's just recording an event. It's a descriptive text, not necessarily a prescriptive text.
in your hearts, honor Christ, your Lord is holy, and always be prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks for the hope inside of you.
For instance, right? Like when you see Peter, being like, Jesus, should we call hellfire down on the Gentiles, the Samaritans, right? And then Jesus rebukes him. Yeah, Jesus rebukes him because Peter's a man. He's a sinner. He sometimes does the wrong thing. And I would say it's infrequent. But there are probably instances in the book of Acts where Paul could have at least probably done something a little different. But the book of Acts is trying to record the event. So
the context. Whoever's asking you, give an apologetic, do so with gentleness and reverence. To whom? To those who ask you.
No.
What if they're not asking because they want to know? What if they're asking to bully you, intimidate you, to blaspheme?
Then you bless them and don't curse them.
I know it 1 Peter 3, but what's the context?
Yeah.
Whoever asks you. Well, what if they're not asking you to learn? What if they're trying to bully you,
I don't even think that's the right reading of the text. I'd like to see. I hope Trent brings up the text.
you? What if they're
I
trying
think he
to
does.
censor you? What
I
if
think
they're
he does
trying
because I watched this over a week ago. I think he does bring it up.
to mock you?
But that's exactly what the context of 1 Peter
Right.
3 addresses. How to remain holy even when evil people attack you. I'm going to read the passage at length so you can see the context is the exact opposite of Sam Shamoun's interpretation. Finally, all of you, have unity of spirit, sympathy, love of the brethren.
Wait, I thought sympathy was toxic now and sinful. No? Oh, it's in the scriptures? Okay.
A tender heart and a humble mind. Do not return evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, bless.
Yeah.
For to this you have been called, that you may obtain a blessing. For, quoting Psalm 34, he that would love life and see good days, let him keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking guile. Let him turn away from evil and do right. Let him seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are upon the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those that do evil. Now who is there to harm you if you are zealous for what is right?
Yep.
So in other words, don't worry about repaying mockers with evil, because God will take care of that.
Yep, just like God did.
Instead, Peter goes on to say this. But even if you do suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled. But in your hearts, reverence Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to make a defense to anyone who calls you to account for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and reverence, and keep your conscience clear, so that when you are abused, those who revile your good behavior in Christ may be put to shame. For it is better to suffer for doing right, if that should be God's will, than for doing wrong. So no, we aren't called to be kind only to those who gently ask us questions.
Yep.
We have to be kind even to people who mock us. Now, we can call out evil with blunt language.
Which is what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to call out evil with blunt language.
But we should strive to be kind when we do that. And when we do that, we actually put our critics to shame by exposing their bad behavior.
Yeah.
But Sam Shamoun's approach and others like him.
Yeah, and I think Trent Horn and Dr. Gavin Ortland do this the best. And I really admire them for that and do my best to grow into that.
It does the opposite. It puts themselves to shame through their bad behavior, and it makes their opponents look good in comparison.
Yeah.
You can see this in Sam's correspondence with Ryan from needgod.net, showing what he said to Sam.
I think it'd be good to watch it and prayerfully reflect on it, because I want you to go to heaven, but I know that trusting in your obedience isn't going to get you there. All right, so I do have a heart for him. I'm praying for him that God saves him. That's my whole aim, is why I'm responding to him. How does he respond? He calls me, I know you are all full of your father, the devil, and you think they're refuted. And then he talks about part 2. He says, stop hiding like a rabid dog. And he says, man up, go for a debate.
And the man up, go for a debate. It's like, no, I'm not debating you. I don't wrestle with pigs in the mud, because the pigs always win, because both of you end up dirty, and pigs dirty already.
He says, son of Satan. As for the cowardly, the faithless, he quotes Revelation 21, their part would be in the lake of fire. You make your father Satan proud. So he's just being completely disrespectful. I've been trying to be kind, courteous to him, completely disrespectful in his response.
Or in this reply Sam gave to a Protestant whose show I'm going to actually go on in a few months.
Sam sent 2 emails back. Spoken like a vile, demonized son of Satan. Typical of you spiritual dogs.
And keep in mind, these are not reviling mockers. They're just Protestants who disagree or kindly ask questions and still get the rough treatment. Now, some people might say that this kind of behavior is the only way to get through to more aggressive critics, people like Muslim apologists who are more likely to resort to bombastic rhetoric. But that's not true, because Christian apologists like Inspiring Philosophy show how to be assertive with Muslim apologists without being abusive or petty. I also pointed out in my previous episode that some of the examples abusive Christians say that they imitate from Scripture aren't actually in Scripture. Like the idea that Jesus whipped human beings when he cleansed the temple.
No, he did not. He whipped animals, which didn't hurt them.
As I pointed out in my previous episode, the grammar of that passage in the Gospel of John suggests that Jesus only used the whip he made to drive out the cattle, which would not have seriously hurt the cattle.
He wouldn't have hurt
only
people.
caused them to leave the temple, and the money changers would have pursued them. Dyer, however, claimed that I, quote, spent several minutes arguing Jesus would never make a whip of cords, which is not true. But as you can see, saying untrue things is a bad habit for Jay Dyer. Sam Shamoon also had this to say.
If a Muslim had done this, I'd say, what a wicked, dishonest distortion of scripture. But for the sake of charity, I have to be Christ-like to him. When John tells us he made a whip of cords and he drove them out, and cords, all he drove out from the temple. And having made a whip of cords, all he drove out from the temple. Both sheep and oxen. Okay.
Yeah, both sheep and oxen. I think he was trying to make a case and he was reading the scripture and realizing he was wrong, but he's like, I can't say that. So, yeah, because having made a whip of cords, all he drove out from the temple, both sheep and oxen. It's implying that he drove out all the animals and the people with them, but not whipping the people, right? Like, it's called context clues, right? You see the character of Jesus. He doesn't hurt anybody, even his enemies, even when he's being nailed to the cross. But in this one instance, he's whipping people. It's like, no, you can imply from the rest of the literary context that this is a driving out of the animals from the temple.
Is now Trent saying that what he drove out are sheep and oxen?
Yes.
So Trent is saying that Jesus was being physically violent to sheep and oxen?
Yes, technically he was, but physical violence, like, it depends on how you define that. He's not hurting them.
Yes, Jesus drove the animals out with an improvised whip, which would not have been violent toward them because of their thick hides and coats.
Yeah.
This action got all the sheep and oxen to leave.
So are you telling me that John just wrote something superfluously, that Jesus made a whip of cords because he had nothing better to do, because he didn't do anything with the whip of cords?
What?
Because the text doesn't say he drove out anyone. That means it didn't even say he drove out animals if we go with this exegesis, right?
No, it doesn't say that. He's saying he drove out the animals and the people with him, but he wasn't hitting the people. And then he flipped the tables. That doesn't hurt the people.
No, Sam, I said Jesus didn't whip anyone. Not anything.
Correct.
I was careful to use the pronoun anyone to refer to the people in the temple, not the animals. And Sam then tries to refute my argument by merely surveying different translations of this.
Literally not one parishioner who is, most of my parishioners are theologically uneducated, which is fine. Like, they don't have formal educations in theology. Never one has ever asked me, did Jesus hit the people? You want to know why? They imply that. They know that because they know the character of Jesus. And so they're like, yeah, he's driving people out of the temple and animals, and he's kind of whipping at the animals, but he's not like whipping some 8-year-old on the back to get him to leave the temple, right? Even an adult, he's not doing that. And it's clear because they know the character of Jesus from the other stories, right? It's like no one's ever asked me that before.
This passage, some of which agree with me.
Because it's implied.
He doesn't deal with the original Greek in the passage or the 2 scholarly articles I cited in my video that make a compelling case for the adjective pantas, referring only to the sheep and the oxen.
Yeah.
You're dishonest and a hypocrite here, Trent. And I say this in love, brother. In love, I got to call you out. Even Paul called Peter a hypocrite, so don't think you're better than Peter. You and I are not good enough to carry Peter's or Paul's sandals. Stay in your lane, brother.
I don't know. I mean, I'd probably carry their sandals. I mean, they're just men, right? They're great men from history, but they're not Jesus. I'm not worthy to carry Jesus' sandals, but I'm worthy to carry Peter and Paul's. They're no better than me. In fact, they would probably argue that, by the way, that they're no better than me or you.
Stay away from the issue of science. Stay away from evolution, creation. Stay away from Genesis.
Okay.
Stay away from these issues of how to treat people. Stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane. Don't talk about anything. Stay in your lane. Don't talk about how you should treat people. Stay in your Christian theology lane, but don't talk about how you treat people, because that's not in the lane. It's like, I mean, if somebody came to me and was like, "Hey, stay in your lane. Don't talk about tax law." Yeah, that would be fair. But how to treat people, that's kind of the gig I do. So
Lane. Don't criticize us so we don't criticize you and put you in your place, brother.
No, thanks. I'm going to keep calling out error. And if you don't like that,
it's fine.
You're free to publicly disagree with me. And people can judge for themselves.
Yep.
But this pseudo-macho approach to Christian apologetics you see in people like Wilson, Dyer, and Shamoon is tiresome.
It is tiresome. And I think him calling it the pseudo-macho approach to apologetics, it is. It's like a manosphere macho approach. And it is probably the most cringe thing on the internet. Yeah, I'm pretty confident in saying that. It's incredibly cringe.
It tries to bully people into accepting their view because their view can't win in a calm and collected exchange of ideas that is free of aggressive debate tricks. Finally, I want to clear up some points on how I engage with critics and what I choose to debate. My goal with the Council of Trent is to help as many people as possible who are the furthest away from Jesus Christ.
Absolutely.
So that's why I focus on debating the major theological and moral issues of our time.
Yeah, there's too much online rhetoric about like the dumbest waste of time issues, right? Like, and I'm seeing really everyone falling into it right now. It's really tiresome, and it's made it difficult. Like, I don't want to engage with this all the time on my channel. And so I'm really focusing on like Bible commentary, trying to focus on theological issues, pastoral issues, and not always stay in this. But I just think this is so important. I agree with Trent. I think this is one of the most important issues of our day, is this degradation of Christian debate.
I have no interest in debating people on things like profanity and apologetics, flat earth theory.
Who cares?
Or unfounded conspiracy theories about the Jews. 2 Timothy 2:23 says, have nothing to do with stupid, senseless controversies.
Yeah.
You know that they breed quarrels.
Amazing text from 2 Timothy. Stupid, senseless controversies. But this is not a stupid, senseless controversy. This is a virus that is plaguing the church. It is incredibly important that all the pastors on YouTube, I'm calling every pastor that is watching this on YouTube, you don't have to start a YouTube channel, but speak out on this. Speak out on this. Start holding as many people as you can on the internet accountable for this. We have to rein this in. It is getting out of control.
This is also why I'm not interested in doing debates on young earth creationism or whether St. Joseph was a widower before he was betrothed to Mary.
Yeah, I just don't think those issues really matter.
Christians are free to accept or reject those positions.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm not interested in debating people on those topics.
Yeah, I won't debate people. I'll share my opinion on it, maybe make a video about it, but I'm not going to like spend all my time debating on stuff that is, I mean, there's tertiary and secondary issues I'll debate on because I think they're important, but like, young earth creationism, like you're not going to find many of those in United Methodist Church, but like there are folks in my church who take a more literal approach to Genesis. And I always tell them that's fine. I said, I disagree with you, right? But that's fine. It's an acceptable position.
Now, I am willing to dialogue with certain people on finer points of disagreement.
Sure.
If they are amenable to dialogue. But my profane critics have shown that they lack the maturity to engage in those kinds of conversations. And so to sit down with them would contradict this old piece of advice. Never wrestle with a pig.
This is what I was talking about. This is like the old Will Rogers had a quote like this. I grew up in Claremore, Oklahoma. And so Will Rogers was from there. Will Rogers in the 1920s was like the most famous man in America. You can go Google him for the kids that don't know who he is. He was basically Jon Stewart before Jon Stewart. That's the way to think about him. And he talks about like never wrestle with a pig because, I was just saying this earlier. I probably thought of it because I watched this video a while ago. I probably had that subconsciously in my head from watching this video.
You get dirty, and besides, the pig likes it.
Yeah, the pig
also,
likes
just
it.
Because I mentioned someone in an episode, that doesn't mean I'm going to send a script for them to review. I send scripts to make sure I don't misunderstand a complex argument or belief system. However, if someone's error or misbehavior is patently obvious, I'm just going to comment on the error.
Yeah.
Plus, if they have a track record of immaturity or an inability to even perceive reality beyond their rhetoric, then I have no reason to expect a good faith reply from them.
That's why he should not have sent the script to Andrew Wilson, because he's not a good faith actor.
So I'm not going to waste my time seeking one.
He probably regrets doing that because Andrew probably sent him a thing like, oh yeah, this all looks fair. Oh, ho, 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 ho. And then it was immediately when Trent releases his video, he was like, Trent is dishonest and a liar, because it's all about the grift. It's about the clicks and the grift and the money that comes from it.
Finally, I hope that if you are interested in apologetics, you will not act like these people.
Do not do it.
Instead, emulate truly mature, modern defenders of the faith, be it Christian apologists like William Lane Craig or John Lennox, or Catholic intellectuals like Scott Hahn and Ed Feser, the latter of whom can throw rhetorical punches while still retaining a gentlemanly disposition. Instead of seeing ourselves as...
But the manosphere piece of this is like, well, they're effeminate. It's effeminate to follow these things that St. Paul said. That is just the definition of sinful misogyny when you think it's effeminate to follow the gentleness commands in the New Testament. It's like, if you think being a man is being mean, you don't understand what it means to be a man. You're just deeply confused as a person.
As apologists first, we should see ourselves first as ambassadors. Those who diplomatically represent Christ to other people. Part of being an ambassador involves standing up for the sovereign you represent, but doing so in a diplomatic way, because we're literally diplomats on behalf of the ultimate sovereign. 2 Corinthians 5:20 says this, "So we are ambassadors for Christ, God making his appeal through us. We beseech you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God." If you'd like to learn more about this topic, I recommend Father Gregory Pine's new book, Training the Tongue, Avoiding Sins of Speech.
I saw that. I think that'd be a great sermon series in my church. I've thought about doing that.
Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you...
that looks like that's everything. Look, the bottom line is this. We have to be gentle in our rhetoric. And these folks like Andrew Wilson, Jay Dyer, Sam Schmoon, the gentleman that he showed, they're all taking this very aggressive, mean approach to apologetics, which is sinful, right? And when that becomes a pattern, it becomes evil. And when evil starts to reign in your heart, your salvation is really at risk, friends. It's at risk. This is really serious, weighty stuff, which is why, like, I'm willing to come on here and say, do not fall for it, because you will get wrapped up in it as well. I actually saw a bunch of people on the internet talking about after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, they were talking about how they fell into extremism for a few months. They were like, for 3 months, I was basically an extremist ready to like advocate for imprisoning Democrats and like all this kind of stuff. And then they said, I became a miserable person and I realized I couldn't live that way, right? Like, young men especially are so vulnerable to falling into extremism right now and falling into being radicalized. That's why it's so important for us as Christians to be gentle, to talk about loving our enemies, praying for those who persecute us. This is the way of Christ. However, when people are being evil in the name of Christ, I'm going to come on here and call it out. I'm going to do it, right? Because it's important that I do. But it's important also to know that those three guys, I love them. I do. I love them. I want them to see the error of what they're doing so that they can use their clearly rhetorical gifts. They have gifts of rhetoric and intelligence. I think it seems that way. I want them to use it for the good of the kingdom of God. And right now it's tearing it down. And that's my issue. So let me know what you think in the comments. I'll be curious to see how you all have been perceiving this. But yeah, let me know how that goes in the comments. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you go like and subscribe to the Council of Trent. He does a lot of great content. We disagree. I disagree with Trent on a lot of stuff, but he always does it in a respectful manner, which I appreciate. So go like and subscribe to his channel. Like and subscribe to my channel, The Connectionalist, as well, if you liked the content today. But until next time, I'm Reverend Matt, and I'm The Connectionalist, and I'll see you again. Bye-bye.